When you think about the biggest fumbles in anime, I'm sure there are more than a few things that come to mind. Promised Neverland Season 2, for example. But how about fumbling a villain that could have been perfect? A character with such potential, such build, and such aura that makes his downfall unlike anything else in the history of anime. Today, I'm going to talk about Madara Uchiha, how his hopes of perfection were dashed, and why the fumble isn't quite what you think. Madara's potential was through the roof, and there are two things that are established from the get-go that give us a bunch of different ways for his character to go. Like Elon, he doesn't trust anyone but himself to be the world's savior, and he's not as smart as he thinks he is. Both of these are fascinating dynamics to build stories around. The first is akin to Doctor Doom, and the latter in the vein of the Riddler. Two very different but extremely compelling villains. One thing his story does well is keeping to these themes. He has a saying, things never go according to plan, and that could not be more fitting for his story. All his actions are informed by his experiences and the history of his world. While we may disagree on the methods he uses to pursue his goals, we can understand why he does the things he does, traditionally a sign that a villain is well written. And early on, that's exactly what he is. Over 300 episodes passed since we were given our first glimpse of him as a statue in the Valley of the End. Between then and now, we've heard stories of his legendary power. We've seen others co-opt his identity to instill fear. And the name Madara Uchiha has as much weight in the ninja world as Voldemort holds in the wizarding one. And now, after decades away, he's back. The Fourth Shinobi War is in full effect. For the first time in history, an alliance has been formed between the 5 great nations of the ninja world. This allied army came together to combat the Akatsuki, but now find themselves standing before the reincarnated version of Madara Uchiha. Even having been dead for years, it takes Madara no time at all to realize the jutsu that has brought him back to life and instantly breaks free of the user's control. Now it's time to see what he can do. We see the fear of the Alliance grow with each step Madara takes towards them. He rushes into the crowd of soldiers and with taijutsu alone, dispatches hundreds of allied shinobi in an instant. One by one, he dissects these soldiers with ease until finally someone lands a single blow on him. Despite Naruto's inclusion, this army of thousands is no match for Madara. He summons a meteor with ease and it rains down upon his foes. It takes everything 2 Kage have to stop this meteor from annihilating everyone below, and right when they think they've succeeded and relief has set in, he drops another one. In an instant, hundreds, if not thousands, are dead. He's just arrived, and he's already won. Naruto is forced to flee. It's one of the single coolest debuts in history, and sorry Ginu, the real definition of aura. From the beginning, he'd been hyped to a mythical degree, and his appearance somehow exceeded that. He follows this up by taking on all 5 Kage on his own. Standing before the leaders of the 5 great nations is a feat beyond comprehension, and not only does he hang with them, he outclasses them completely. We see him go face to face with Might Guy after unlocking all 8 gates, and instead of fearing this immense power, even when he's taking serious damage, Madara's having the time of his life. This dude isn't just different, he's special. But why? Madara grew up as part of the Uchiha clan during the Warring States period. 3 of his siblings died early, leaving only he and his brother Izuna remaining. The realization of the brutality of their world made them realize the most valuable commodity in the ninja world is strength. This pushed Madara to grow more powerful at all costs, so much so that he successfully defeats a shinobi from the enemy Senju clan. Shortly after, he met Hashirama, a goofster and fellow shinobi, and they quickly bonded over their shared experiences, like losing siblings on the battlefield and their life savings on Hakuo coin. The two became friends and rivals. Eventually he learned Hashirama was a Senju, so they were destined to be mortal enemies. When forced to choose between his clan and his friend, Madara chose the clan. He was no match for Hashirama on the battlefield, though his friend could never bring himself to take Madara's life. The same couldn't be said for Izuna, who was killed in battle by Hashirama's brother, Tobirama. This cycle of violence continued for years until they were each the head of their respective clans. Hashirama continuously advocated for peace, but because of his brother's murder, Madara could never accept it. This pettiness caused part of his own clan to defect in the process. In a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the war, he attacked one last time, only to fail once again. But this time was different. Hashirama offered to kill himself if that would finally end the fighting, and this gesture was so powerful, it swayed Madara. The two clans combined to form the Hidden Leaf Village, a place where children would never know war, and their friendship was rekindled. His distrust for the Senju never waned, how could it? But he did trust Hashirama, and for maybe the first time in his life, he felt hope for what they could achieve together. However, their definitions of peace differed. Hashirama's came through cooperation while Madara's came through control. Even so, Madara had his friend's support to be the first leader of the Hidden Leaf, the first Hokage. Except, it was Hashirama who was elected to the position. This was an important turning point. Madara had forgiven the Senju for the atrocities they had committed against his clan. He had worked together with his friend to build this nation up, and in return, he wasn't trusted enough to be their leader. He could see this did not bode well for the Uchiha and became wary his clan would concede more control to the Senju. That's when he deciphered a stone tablet and learned more of the history of violence between the clans and the cycle of never-ending war, and it jaded him further. He tried to confide in his people what he had discovered, but they turned him away. Neither his people nor his friends supported his ideals. If he wanted to achieve them, he had to do so alone. He couldn't protect his brother, and now his clan had turned their back on him. So he abandoned the village he helped found, returning on numerous occasions to attack it. His final attempt came with the great power of the Nine-Tails Fox, yet he failed again. In his arrogance, he was defeated by one of the oldest tricks in the book, which led to him getting stabbed through the back by Hashirama and dying. There's an important moment where Hashirama says that he'd take the life of his own child if he attacked the Hidden Leaf. This was confirmation to Madara that he was in the right. This was no longer the man he knew. The boy he met so long ago hated his father for sacrificing children on the battlefield, and the man behind him was now preaching the same thing. Madara died knowing there was truly no one he could trust. For this accursed world to know peace, it could only come by his doing. But his death wasn't the end of his story. Madara knew failure was an option against Hashirama, so he pulled an Aizen and had a contingency. He used an ability that would trigger if he died, where for the cost of one of his eyes, his life would be restored. He rejected the world Hashirama had created and devised a new plan for peace. It was time for Madara to save the world. His will was so powerful, it even created an entity to do his bidding, Black Zetsu. His plan was one he learned of on the stone tablet that told him the history of violence. The only way to remove evil was to remove choice, and so he began the Eye of the Moon plan, one where if he were to succeed, he would basically hypnotize everyone on the planet into living in their own personal utopia. This was the only way peace could be achieved. But this was a massive undertaking, and he knew that he wouldn't live long enough to complete this mission. So he gave his eyes to a young boy named Nagato, betting that the boy would eventually be able to bring him back to life with the abilities of those eyes. However, that would be leaving things up to chance, and things never go according to plan. He needed someone to make sure it would happen. Enter Obito, an Uchiha boy who had been injured during war. After placing a failsafe inside Obito to keep him loyal, Obito watched as the love of his life was murdered by his best friend, all orchestrated by Madara. The plan was evil, but also a success. When the time came, Obito would revive Madara and the Eye of the Moon plan would commence. He even allowed Obito to take on the moniker of Madara to help the cause while the real one passed away. But things never go according to plan. It's reasonable for someone who went through what he did and had the gifts he did to think he's the only one who knows how to save the world. He'd lived through war, seen the cycle repeat itself endlessly. witnessed firsthand how little trust mattered, learned power was necessary for change, and he had the strength to do something about it. When he returns, it's not Obito who brought him back, but no matter, he fends off the allied shinobi, he defeats the 5 Kage, he survives 8 Gate Sky, he betrays Obito, and he achieves his goal. It didn't go as planned, yet the Eye of the Moon plan was a success. Then he's stabbed in the back by Black Zetsu, who had been working for the Mother of Chakra the whole time, Kaguya. His body is overtaken by her, and in an instant, he's no longer the big bad, he's fodder. And it's important to note here, the betrayal itself actually makes quite a bit of sense. There has always been a distinct gap between perception and reality with Madara. It comes back to the 2 things I pointed out earlier. He doesn't trust anyone, and he's not as smart as he thinks he is. His inability to trust anyone, or perhaps more accurately, his absolute trust in himself, played a major role in this happening. He placed unwavering faith in Black Zetsu because he thought of it as an extension of himself when it wasn't. And that leads to him for the 2nd time losing a battle he thought he'd won by getting stabbed in the back. In the end, what happened to him was no different than what he did to Obito. Obito was a pawn to him, and in his arrogance, he never realized he was a pawn to Kaguya. So when I call his demise the biggest fumble in anime history, it's not necessarily what happened, it's who did it and what we lost in the process. It could have been amazing if handled right, but it wasn't. Kaguya was an alien plot device with no ties to any characters and no meaningful ideology, which goes against the whole ideological conflict between differing perspectives story they'd been telling from the start. While we spent a ton of time building up Madara, the series, like this video, did not do that for Kaguya. Whether through words or actions, all the best conflicts in the show were centered around competing philosophical differences, and this was not that. Like Pain, Madara's wake up to reality speech makes you go, you know, maybe he has a point. But unlike Pain, we never get a rebuttal. Madara's worldview was never challenged by the good guys, he was stabbed in the back by an alien. That's fitting for his character, but not the story at hand. You can make the argument that Madara didn't have personal ties to a lot of the cast too, and I think that's mostly fair, but we are also in the process of building that up. He had a hand in creating a lot of what we had seen throughout the story. He was directly responsible for Pain and the Akatsuki. He was directly responsible for Obito. Hell, he was responsible for the distrust of the Uchiha clan and straight up founded the main village of the series. Then, right at the apex of his story, he went out like James Harden in a Game 7. No villain in anime has ever been cucked harder because everything he did, including successfully enacting his plan, amounted to nothing. You could have done a betrayal that worked with a better build and without invalidating his entire existence. The other thing is, when you dig into it deeper, Madara's plan falls on its face too. And I know Zetsu manipulated him, but the Eye of the Moon plan, while interesting, was created by an evil, selfish individual who desired control and never cared about peace. Yes, Madara was also controlling, but unlike Kaguya, he did want peace. Basing your plan for that off the idea of someone who doesn't want it is stupid at best. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't look to a Hitler manifesto to come up with a peace plan, and that's essentially what he did. I like Madara a lot. That's why the way things played out stings so much. Naruto is one of the biggest, most popular anime ever, and Madara felt like the natural conclusion to that series. Everything was right there for him to be perfect, and then it was gone. It's the biggest fumble in anime. With that, I'm out.